So welcome everyone, and a particular welcome to the people who've registered from Brazil in support of Breno. So it's really good to see you here. Just a few words about the Central Association of Beekeepers. We are a UK charity which aims to sort of bridge academia and beekeeping. So we have a sort of strapline which says bringing science to the beekeeper, or making science central to beekeeping. We don't, and we have members from all over the UK and indeed other parts of the world as well, a few in America, Canada, France, Germany, and so on. So this is actually the 20th talk that's been delivered via Zoom since I think June 2020, and so I'm delighted tonight to welcome Breno to talk about the Brazilian, well, South American stingless bees and solitary bees. So over to you, Breno. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
I'd like to thank you, the Central Association of Beekeepers, for the invitation, and Bob and Professor Picard that has been in contact with me about this talk, and it will be a pleasure to talk to you, to the colleagues from the UK, about the stingless bees and the tropical solitary bees in with some emphasis to the bees in Brazil. This is where I live and work. Well, as we know, there are more than 20,000 bee species in the world, but out of this huge number of bees, about 85% of them are solitary species, while only the apes species and the stingless bees are the true social bees. And it's important to stress this because in this talk, we are considering as solitary bees all the species which do not live in perennial colonies with a queen and workers with this clear division of labor. We have in the world many different bee species that can have some kind of association, but they are temporary, they are not permanent colonies. So in this case, we're not considering them as social bees, they are solitary bees. The bees are classified in 7 different families. Here in Brazil, we have 5 of them: Apidia, Megachilidia, Andrenidia, Alictidia, and Collectidae. But we don't have Melitidia and also Stenotitidia. And our talk, we are going to talk about some bees that are in the family Apidae. The Xylocopa bees, known as carpenter bees, from the tribe Xylocopini, the genus Xylocopa, that they are in the subfamily Xylocopinae, and also on the bees from the subfamily Apinae, that where we find, for example, the tribe Bombini, the bumblebee, very closely to the Meliponini, which are the stingless bees, and then Apini, which are the honeybee, the apes bees, and Euglossini, that are called the orchid bees. These 4 tribes are what we call the corbiculate bees because they have corbiculate. And also not shown here, but we were also talking about another tribe that is Centridini, but also within the Apinae here, that are the oil collecting bees. You probably are very familiar with these solitary bee species from the northern hemisphere, like Megachilea rotundata, Osmia lignaria, Osmia cornuta, Nome melanderi. But we are going to talk about tropical bees. And the bees we're talking now, the solitary bees, are from these 3 tribes, as I mentioned, Euglossini, Centridini, and Xylocopini, that they are found from the southern of the United States to more or less the central part of Argentina. So they cover all this long territory here, except the Xylocopini, which are found all around the world. In Brazil, we have now, presently, 1,965 bee species described. I say presently because every year we are finding new species or describing new species, especially in the Amazon area. So it changed very fast. And out of these almost 2,000 bee species, around 1,600 are solitary bees, because there are about 330 species of stingless bees and 8 bumblebee species in Brazil. So the first group we're going to talk are the called oil collecting bees. There are about 330 bee species that use floral oils to build their nest and feed their young. So this is interesting because most of bees feed the young with pollen and nectar, but this group of bees, they use the oil they collect from sunflowers as an energy source, which has the advantage that it's much more energetic than the nectar itself, and also it doesn't fermentate. When you are in a hot, humid environment, this is a great advantage. And these bees, they are found in the subfamily Melitinae, tribe, in the family Melitidae, and in the tribe Centridini, Tapnotaspidini, and Tetrapedini, in the family Apidae. But here we will concentrate on bees of the genus Centris, which is the one that's more represented and has more than the 250 species of oil collecting bees. And these Centris bees, they are fast flying, medium to large bees, and they do very well in warm weather, especially in the dry and hot environment, and they fly at higher temperature than other solitary bees and the other bees that we are acquainted with. These bees, they may nest in the ground, as you can see here. They dig, especially in soft sand, their nests, and of course they collect pollen to feed their young, as you can see. But there are also other species which will nest in hollows or crevices they found in dead wood or even living wood. And these bees, in this case, they make this nest above the ground. They are truly solitary bees, like we see, for example, in other solitary bees, in the bees that we are familiar with, where the females, after emerging, they are mated. Some in the ground as soon as they emerge. Others, when they go to feed in flowers, the males they mark some territories in these areas, and when the female enters to feed on the flowers, they will grab and make the females. And then the female alone, because it's a solitary bee, will do that cycle that probably you're familiar with. That's it, goes to flowers. In this case, it digs on the ground, make a cell where it collects pollen, and most of bees would mix this pollen with nectar. In this case, the oil collecting bee mix it with oil, vegetable oil that it collect, flower oil that it collect from flowers, lay the egg, the larva will hatch, eat the pollen, impupate, and then come out as an adult. Because here we are in a tropical country, there are no weather restriction, let's say, so these bees are active all year round, so they have many cycles like that throughout the year. Of course, in some months of the year, you can have some species that are more abundant than others because they have their favorite source of food, or because the ground where they nest is not flooded or something like that, so they will be more abundant in some time of the year, but they are active all year round. And like all other bees, they will go to flowers to collect pollen and collect nectar for themselves, for the adults, and the pollen also for the brood. But the oil, they need some special flowers. Some flowers that instead of producing nectar, they have these glands that you can see here. There are special glands that secrete oil. And usually these flowers don't produce much pollen. So the bee will collect nectar and you collect pollen from other plants, but it will depend on these plants that we can find in some different plant family, but they are very common in the Malpighiaceae family. As you can see here, for example, the West India cherry, acerola, or the Nancy, for example, they have these glands, and the bee will look only for oil in this plant, and it will collect the oil, and as it approach the flower and visit the flower, it will pollinate it. Here we can see, I forgot to say one thing. I would like to call attention for you for this, this top petal. As you can see, the flowers usually have 5 petals, and the petal of the petal is very thin and delicate. But on the flower on the top, it is quite white and tough. It happened because the bee, to collect the oil, it will sit on the flower and grab this petal with the mandible, and then it will hang on the flower to have the 4 legs free to scratch that gland, the oil glands, with special hairs they have in the 4 legs that will collect this oil, and then they transfer it for the scopa, this area of the legs full of hair, and the oil then will be stored there for the bee to take it to the nest. And because they visit these oil plants, like, for example, acerola and Nancy, that are fruits which are much valued here, for example, in Brazil, and acerola even is an export product nowadays, they are the only pollinators of these plants, because the other bees don't visit oil flowers because there is no nectar and not enough pollen for them. So it's basically, they are basically visited by oil collecting bees, and they are the important pollinators. But because the adults need the nectar for themselves and also need pollen for the brood, they will visit other flowers, not only oil collecting flowers, like, for example, cashew, beans, and they can pollinate these flowers also. So they are not important only to pollinate oil flowers or crops which have oil flowers, but also other crops. And because of that, we have been studying these bees. You can see some of our former students working here. She's preparing straws made of cardboard for the bees to nest inside. And then you have the trap nest that you're familiar with, this kind of nest. Then you put the straw inside, and the bee will nest inside this straw. See, here you can see a female Centris analis approaching the nests, and you see some of the nests are already finished, closed by the previous female. And here she's with pollen, this copa, and getting to her nest. And when they are not in the field, usually they stay on the entrance as guarding the nest, because other females may want to overtake the nest. And when they finish the nest, you can open it, and you see this sequence of cells, where the cells on the bottom, we already have a larva here, and here also that the larva was dislodged from the top when we open the nest. And here you can see, for example, an egg. And what it really call attention is because it's not actually a pollen load. It's a mix of pollen in oil that is quite oily thing. And you see that each cell, there is a partition the bees made from cell to cell. When it finish one cell and start the other. And here you can see the female closing the nest. The bee used the nest not only to feed the larvae, but also to line the nest inside, and also to close this nest. And here you can see one that was closed some days ago, and now these females finish her nest, removing the oil from this copa, and you can see the oil here. And here there is another one doing the same, close to another nest that was finished by a previous one. So we know that the bee has finished the nest when we see the oil here, and especially if it's like that, very fresh and quite oily, let's say, not dried yet, and then we know that it just have finished the nest. Well, these bees, we can take them to the field. Brazil nowadays is a large exporter of vitamin C that is extracted from acerola, from the West Indian cherry. I don't know this if you know, but the West Indian cherry has 50 times the amount of vitamin C of orange, for example. So it's grown largely for the fruits, for juice, but especially to crush everything and extract the vitamin C that's what is exported. So there are small growers and large growers, things like 250 hectares, 400 hectares of acerola, and the bees that are present in the environment pollinate these plants, but of course they are not enough for the amount of flowers. So when you introduce the nests with the centris nest inside, the centris bee, they'll visit the flowers and they'll set the fruit. And it's important to stress that we use the bees which are native to that area. We don't move bees around between areas to prevent hybridization, to prevent to transmit disease and whatever. And here, one thing very important that we do in these farms are to assess the other plants that are in the surrounding of the crop area, and then to know which plants are native to the area and occurs naturally there, and also to investigate the pollen that the bees is collecting and feeding the larvae, so we can promote these plants in the area, because as I told before, the acerola provides only the oil, and the bee need the other plants for the nectar and especially for the pollen for the brood. And here you can have an idea of the acerola plant and the flower with the glands, the oil glands here, and when it's blooming in the fruits. And it's not, no wonder why it's called also West Indian cherry, because it has the size, the color, the shape. It looks a lot on the European cherry, for example. And here you can see the bee visiting flowers. Well, moving to another group of bees that we have here, we have the euglossine bees, or known as also as orchid bees. These bees are very, very nice. They are beautiful bees. And what's remarkable in these bees is because they are colorful and they are metallic colors. So they're really very, very beautiful. And also, this what's called attention is the long tongue, and actually euglossine or euglossa come from the Greek and means the true glossa, the true tongue, because it's really huge in these bees. As you can see here, for example, some dead ones look the size of these tongues, glossa, and here again when it's feeding. And it's fascinating because it doesn't fold the glossa like the honeybee does. So it goes sticking backwards. And sometimes you see the bee flying with that thing behind it. And many people think it's the stinger, but actually it's the tongue that goes behind the bee. And here you can see different species of this group of bees. But the common name of orchid bees, the bees are called, is not because of the tongue, but because of the male bees. While the male bees in other bee species or another group of bees are not that important or that relevant, these male bees on this group of bees, they are really fascinating because they have this special structure here on the hind legs, and they visit orchid flowers, and they collect the essence from these flowers and store in this structure. And with this essence, they will synthesize, they will produce a sexual pheromone to attract the female bees. And the sexual pheromone is not the essence itself, because the orchid bees don't attract the female bees. And also, if you collect it and you expose it, you attract a lot of male, but no female. So it's clearly processed by the bee to transform it in the sexual pheromone. And as you can see, when the orchid blooms, there are a lot of them. And that's interesting because the orchids have developed many strategies to attract these males and then to get pollinated by them. Because when they visit, the orchid will attach the pollen, that it's this structure where they have their pollen grains. And then the male will fly with the structure on it, usually here on the back of the thorax, but depending on the orchid species and the orchid bee, it may come here on the front or here on the back of the abdomen. And then as it goes from orchid flower to orchid flower, collect the essence, it also pollinate the flower. So it is interesting because the orchid flower is pollinated by the male bees of this group of bees. And that's why they're called orchid bees. And then they are easy to catch because of that. Also, the bees collect the essence not only from orchids, but whatever produce the essence in nature. So you can find, for example, these bees, the male bees collecting from dead wood, some of the essence they produce, from other plants like this anthurium, for example, or even from some kind of mushrooms that will produce some of the essence that they like. That they are basically volatile compounds like methyl salicylates, eugenol, cineol, benzyl acetate, methyl benzoate, methyl cinnamate, and even scatol. Because scatol, you know, that's that bad smell that comes from, for example, feces. But they also collect this. And then because of that, we can prepare baits for these bees. As you can see here, a cloth where you can soak one of these substances and hang on the forest, because they are the orchid bees are bees from forest, not from open space. And then the bees will come to collect it. And you can prepare some kind of bait like this one here, that is basically a PET bottle, where you put some funnels in it, and inside a cotton ball with one of these essence on it, and the bee will get inside, and then it cannot leave. And you can sample which of these species occurs in the area. You can see here my former student quite happy for her project with the bottle full of male bees. So because of that, these species usually are described by the males. The males are, we can collect them easily, while the females are very difficult to collect because they visit in forests, as I said, they visit the flowers high in the canopy. They are not attracted by the essence, and their nests are very difficult to find. As you can see here, for example, there's a pen and this small crevice here, this small hole in the ground where the female get inside, and then inside of it you have the chamber where it built its nest. So it's really by chance that you find their nests. They are not easy to find. And what is interesting is that the orchid bees, they are classified in 5 different genera. 3 of them are free living species, but 2 genera, the excavate and the aglaia, are parasite bees. So actually they parasite the nest of other euglossine bees. But they are important pollinators of orchids, because the males still have to visit the orchids to collect the essence to attract the female. Well, these bees, we can bait them with some boxes that close to the forest, and then they will come and make their nest inside. As you can see here, this it's not Eulema cordata, it's Euglossa cordata, making the nest. You can see the cell. And so here the food it's preparing for the larva. It's a mass provisioning strategy. And then when they have it full, it will lay the egg and then close the cells. And as I told you in the beginning, different of the oil collecting bees, where the bee lives alone or built it nest alone, here with these euglossine bees, it's possible that they may have some association during short period of times with a sister or a non-related female that may come to the nest and work under the supervision of the laying bee or not, but there is always a tension, and sometimes it goes wrong from one of them. So it's common to see dead ones inside, but when the things work, they can build quite a lot of cells, as you can see here. And here you see another example with a bee that is Eulima nigrita, that is very common throughout the country. Maybe it's the most abundant species of euglossine you have in Brazil. But you see that the female, unlike the males that visit the orchid flowers, the female doesn't visit orchid. It visits the other flowers to collect nectar and pollen. And then in doing so, they are good pollinator of other plants. I believe that you have heard already the story about the Brazil nut that is mainly pollinated by these euglossine bees. Here we have the nuts that we are all familiar with. Here we have the Brazil nut tree. That's a high tree that goes 35, 30 meters, 40 meters high. It occurs in all the Amazon area, Amazon forest, not only in the Brazilian Amazon forest, but also in the Guyana, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia. And the plants produce these big fruits. It's like a coconut fruit, that big, with a very, very tough shell. It's very difficult to break into it, where then you can find the nuts here. And then you have to remove this wooden part of the nut, and you have what we eat. These are the seeds. It's very tough to break into it. And then here's the inflorescence, where you have these also big flowers. But what's interesting is that in the flower of the Brazil nut, this petal that is called the hood, it doesn't open. So the sexual organs, they remain inside the flower. And then if we cut it open, we see that there are stamens here with the stigma in the middle of it, and then the staminodes. So if you look the flowers, if we go there and pull the hood backwards, then what we see is the staminodes here, the stigma here, and the anthers. Then the bee has to come and pull this hood backwards, and then it can have access to the flower, to the nectar. But see, the pollen that it brings here will touch the stigma and pollinate the flower. And this is very important because the Brazil nut is dependent on cross-pollination. It doesn't set fruit if it's self-pollinated. And what's interesting is that this work we did there in the Amazon with the Brazil nut, while the large bees, the euglossine bees, can pull the hood and get inside, smaller bees like this stingless bee, this Physiomelita bee, it can't get inside, so it stays outside, robbing the pollen from the corbiculae of the other bees. And here are an example of the diversity of bees we sampled there. Most of them are euglossine or orchid bees. There's a list here you can see. Epicaries, all of Epicaries are orchid bees. Eulima or orchid bees, and the same with Euphrasia. There are the three free-flying genera of orchid bees. All of them visit and pollinate the Brazil nut, as you can see here in these pictures, different species of them. Just in case you're wondering what animal would eat that fruit, it's the agouti. It's a rodent native to the forest who has very big and strong teeth, and then it will break this thing apart, eat part of the nuts, and then disperse the other part to dig and hide to eat later and forget, and then you have a new Brazil nut tree. Well, the last group of solitary bees we're going to talk about are the carpenter bees. As I told in the beginning of the talk, these bees, they don't occur only in the Americas, they occur throughout the world. There are more than 700 species. Even in Southern Europe, up to Germany, there are some native Xylocopa bees, the carpenter bees, southern United States, in Southeast, in Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia. And these bees in Brazil have 5 to 6 species. And what's remarkable for these bees First, because females usually have this black or blackish color with sometimes some markings in yellow or reddish, but predominantly black, while the males are yellow. This is a sexual dimorphism that makes very easy to find to determine the sex. And they actually dig inside dead wood. So they have very tough mandibles to dig in the wood and make these tunnels, as you see here, where they will produce their brood. Then they collect pollen and nectar and make the pollen load, lay a huge egg. The egg is really, really very big. And then it closes with the chewed wood. The bits of wood, it closes the cells and do it one after the other. These bees are very important pollinators of plants which have large flowers. Plants like passion fruit, anato, pitaya, that's the dragon fruit, some hemp, the Brazil nut also, because they can get inside these flowers and they fit just in the size to contact the stigmas and stamina and do the pollination, while other bees, like for example here in the honeybee, for example, they are too small to contact the stigma, for example, and they may just visit there and drop the pollen and do not pollinate. Well, the problem with these bees, for many years, people want to rear these bees, but the problem is that they make the nest inside dead wood. So it's very difficult to breed a bee that doesn't make a nest in a cavity. So we have been working with these bees for more than 20 years, and then we came out with this nest where instead of having wax sheet here, like in the honeybee, you have a sheet of wood, let's say, in the correct diameter, and then the bee will nest inside and make the galleries, and then you have glass from one side and the other, and you can follow what they are doing inside, and you can see, for example, adult females and male. And in this case, these bees are solitary, but they are what we call parasocial bees, because the female doesn't die or leave the nest, and it will live for 20, 30 days with the offspring until they are mature enough to leave and found their own nest. So there is a short period of time that they will live with each other. And here now we can rear these bees, and we're using them also for pollination. As you can see here, introducing passion fruit crops. And we even produced these two books. This one is in Portuguese, is out of print, but this one, it's bilingual, Portuguese and English. It's not about the rearing of the bee, but just about its natural history. And you can download using this link here. It's free. And now, the last group of bees I was going to talk about, the stingless bees. The stingless bees, they are a group of pantropical bees, or that means they occur in all the tropical regions of the world, about 550 species. And Brazil is where we can find more species, with 330 species described. One interesting thing is that there are many genera in the group of the stingless bees, but one genera, the Melipona, that comprise about 70 species, it occurs only in Central and South America, and it's one of the favorite bees by beekeepers because they are larger, they look more like honeybees, they are less defensive, and they usually produce more honey than the other bees. Here you can see other bees from other genera, so we can see they look quite different. Someone look more like a wasp or other insects, while the Melipona is the one more that resemble more what we think a bee is. As I told you, the bees are all around the tropical world, in Africa, Singapore, Costa Rica, Peru, Mexico, Australia. But all these countries, they have the other genera of stingless bees, not the Melipona, except the South American ones in Central America, like Costa Rica, Mexico, and Peru, the ones in the America, because then they have the Melipona group. Well, one difficult thing with the stingless bees is that we have many cryptic species. That means species which resemble very much each other. And actually, you need a bee taxonomist to get in there and say, see, this bee has a different hair here or a different thing here. And then you can find that the bees are really different. And now with the advent of DNA and also the comparison of the ADN Italia, then we could really split many bees in different bee species. For example, about 2 years ago, we just described this species Paratrigona intermedia here in this area of Brazil. That's where I live. And previously, it was considered to be Paratrigona lineata. That is the other one close to this area. But then we could find that it's actually a different bee species. Well, these are truly social bees. They live in perennial colonies. They have the clear division of labor with workers, male and queen. They take much longer than a honeybee to emerge, but they don't change very much between the cases. For example, the workers, depend on these species, will take 40 to 52 days to emerge, the male 40 to 42, the queen 40 to 42 days. And they live longer than a honeybee, 60 to 80 days, usually, and the queen 1 to 2 years. And the number of individuals per colony will depend on the species. The Melipona bees tend to be to have a small amount of bees, 200, 400, 500, 600, maybe 1,000, while the other groups, especially the Trigona, for example, 1,000 of bees, even more than a honeybee colony. The number of males vary from 0 to 400, and the queens, usually it's only one queen per colony, but some species, like Melipona bicolor, you can find more than one queen, 2, 3, 4, 5 queens, as you see here, leaving the colony and without major problem. But it's not that common. They range in size very much, from large bees larger than a honeybee, with like Melipona fuliginosa with 13 millimeters, to tiny ones like this Trigona muelleri with 1.5 millimeter. They're social bees, but they're really tiny. As you can compare here with the head of a match, you can see the entrance of their nest, the size of the bee. And these bees, they used to collect secretions from our body, like sweat, for example, and even from our tears. So in Portuguese, for example, there are popular names saying that they lick tears, or lick eyes, actually. They have a varied behavior, nesting behavior, nest architecture, as you can see. They can live up in the trees, either in holes of the trees or in structures they built by themselves using chilled fiber from plants and other material like resins. Also, they can live in the ground using pre-existing cavities. They can live inside termite nests, aerial termite nests, as you can see, in roots of plants. So they are very flexible in what kind of nesting behavior and architecture. But basically, their nests are composed by horizontal combs, as you can see, with the cells facing upwards. And these combs are surrounded by an involucrum made of wax that can have 1 or 2 or more layers of wax here. And then they have pots, wax pots, where they will store their honey and their pollen. So they don't store food in the same cells that they produce the brood. And then they have a tunnel that goes outside, And depending on the bee species, it can be just something really discrete here, or a wax pipe like we can see here. In this picture, for example, where the tree trunk was in the horizontal, not in the vertical, we can see here the brood with the combs, one on the top of the other, like a building, like the floors of a building. And then you see the amount of pollen, of pots of pollen here and honey in the other side. And also, if the space is too big for them, they will close it. They will close the cavity, the bottom and the top, with bitumen. That is a mixture of clay with resins that they collect and wax also to restrict the size of the nest and to facilitate to control temperature and humidity inside. The nest entrance can have different presentations, as you can see. This one in this side are the Melipona group. The Melipona bees usually make this straight entrance with resins and clay that they collect, as you can see here. While the other group of stingless bees, they produce this varied nest entrance, something really very, very elaborate, like this one from these Listrimelita bees. In the Melipona, usually you have only one guard bee. So because they have a smaller population, so you don't need to have wide entrance. So they restrict it the more they can. So one bee can go out and in at once, and then there will be a guard here to make sure that only people from that hive that colony will get inside. While the other bees, because they have a large population, so the entrance is usually wider, and many bees can come in and out at the same time, and then they have much more guard bees in the entrance. And here, the brood combs, they stack one in the top of the other, as you can see, and they may have different arrangements, as you see in this drawing, and also here in these actual pictures. Here in this case with these segmented combs, and here in the spiral comb, and here in hexagonal fashion. And you can see here the involucrum around it, surrounding it. So they can have different presentations. But as I said, I told you the cells are facing upwards. So these are cells that are being built, and these ones are already sealed. Some stingless bees don't produce their combs in horizontal comb. They produce their brood in bunch, like great bunch, like we can see here. In other, they produce vertical combs, like the honeybee. But instead of the cell is opening to the side, like in the honeybee, or instead of the cell is built in a horizontal way, in the vertical comb, it's built facing upward also. So it's a vertical comb in the Scaura langula. This is not common in stingless bees, but of course, as you can see here. Different of the honeybee, the food provision is a massive food provision. That means that once the worker build the cell, they will regurgitate a lot of brood food inside. And when there is enough, they will call the queen will come, will taste this food. Depending on the species, the worker may lay a trophic egg that the queen will eat this egg and then lay its own egg, or they may just lay the egg directly, as you can see here, and then a worker will come and seal the cell. There are all sorts of variations in this laying behavior of the queen. And here you have the cell is empty here, so they put the food, the queen lay the egg, then the larva will eat it, and like in the honeybee, it will unfold upwards. But all these happen with the cell already sealed. So all the food the larva will need is placed at once in the beginning before the queen lay the egg. And then finally the worker will come out. One interesting thing is that the stingless bees, their wax glands are on the on the abdomen like the honeybee, but instead of being the ventral part, is in the dorsal part of the abdomen, and they don't produce much wax. So they really save their wax in a way that is really interesting. When they are building new combs, the combs are, as you can see here, so they make the cell made of wax, but as soon as the larva build its cocoon inside, the adult bees will come and remove all the wax. And so what you see here in the older brood is actually the cocoon where the bee is developing inside, and this wax is reused in the nest. And then you can see here, clearly you can see this is old brood, this is new brood, the same old brood, the ones that are hatching, the new brood, so again, new brood, old brood. So they go recycling this wax. And also, as soon as the brood emerge, they will remove the cocoon, so that comb is completely destroyed. So they are always building new combs in the nest. And while the food, the pollen or the honey is stored in these pollen pots that they build around the brood area. In the bees that make that cells in bunch happen the same. As you can see here, they also make food pots of pollen and honey surrounding the bunch of cells. And here, that tiny one you saw, a nest inside a coconut, as you can see. Here you have the brooding bunch, and here you have some honey cells here. So these bees produce very, very, very little honey. And other bees, they, instead of pollen pots, they make the pots for the honey, but instead of pollen pots, they make these towers of pollen. That is really interesting, this group, this Physiomelita bees. You can see it's very distinguished from the honey pots. So in this one, it's very easy to see what's pollen and what's honey, because they are in different different pots, let's say. And one really interesting thing is that while most bees have their protein source from pollen, there are some species of stingless bees in the Amazon where sometimes it's difficult to find pollen, where they have evolved to eat meat. So they find a dead animal and they will go there and collect the meat. As you can see, they have mandibles with very strong and modified teeth to cut this meat out. Their corbicula is very reduced, and then they are obligatory necrophagy bees. That means they need to have that flesh to have protein. And these will regurgitate inside the pollen, the nectar pots, and then you have a enriched honey with amino acids. Another interesting thing is that these bees, they have a garbage bin in the colony. So all their garbage, they store in one area of the colony, and then when it's already full of things there, so they can come and remove from the colony. Even the excess of humidity, they will throw outside. So sometimes you get to the colony when you have bees in humid area, and then you see that everything's wet around the bees, regurgitating that it's not nectar, it's not honey, it's the excess of water inside of the nest. And here you see the involucrum. That's bees where it's cold, or in areas where it's cold, they build this involucrum in the nest. Then if you remove, you can see the combs and the honey pots inside. Well, and the queen rearing stingless bees is very interesting, because while the honey bees, the queen is determined by a trophic determination by the food quality. That means the royal jelly, that is different of the food the other bees eat. In the stingless bees, there is also a trophic determination, but it's by the amount of food. That means they will feed the larva with more food than it feed the other larva, and then it will become a queen. Or a trophogenetic determination. Some larvae that's what happened with the Melipona genus. Some larvae, they are genetically determined to be queens, but it depends on being well fed. So here you see the trophic determination by the amount of food. It's very similar to what happened with the honeybees. The bees will build a larger cell, usually on the border of the combs, as you can see here, and they will just place more food than they would place for the other larvae, and then this larva will become a queen. It's not a royal jelly, it's not a different food, it's just the amount of food. There is a variation in this method on the bees that build that cells in bunch, that you can see here a larger cell, but usually this cell is not built by the bees. It's just the larva that pierce the neighboring cell and eats more food, and then the bees adjust that and they become a queen. You can see here, for example, in some species, they can build an adjacent cell and put the food, and then the larva will pierce this new cell and eat, and you become a queen. And that's interesting because these queens, they impersonate the queens, the excess queens. For example, if they produce a new queen, but they still have their queen, they can just build cells like this and impersonate this virgin queen there and keep it for a long period of time, and will release it if they need, if the queen dies or something happens with the queen. Probably because, as we saw, it takes 42 days to a new queen be born. So it's good to have someone in the as a sort of insurance in this case. Well, in the trophic genetic determination, there are no special cell, no queen cell is prepared, and no special food is given. Just food is given to everyone, and the ones we are genetically determined to become queens, they will become queens, like you can see here. For example, the queens are the ones with the smaller eyes, as you can see here, right? So the ones with big eyes are ordinary workers. These ones are queens. So these produce an excessive number of queens, because up to 25% of the bees may become as virgin queens. So imagine every 100 female individuals born in the colony, 25 become queens. Usually it doesn't happen. Usually it varies from 8, 10, 12%, because there's this think of the food that is necessary, but they always produce queens in excess, and then the workers just kill these queens because there are too many. Well, these bees, they are stingless bees, but they are no way defenseless. They have a lot of strategies to defend themselves, like, for example, a nest in place of very difficult access or discretion. For example, here is the entrance of a nest of one colony, but it's very difficult to find it here among of all these roots and things. Again, here or here in the ground, so they can be displayed. It's difficult to find. Others produce this elaborate nest entrance that some people believe that it intimidates other insects or arachnids, for example, or other animals that could be intimidated by, because they think this is a larger animal, for example. They also have their guards in the nest entrance, so there's no way anyone can get inside without having to pass the guards, and they have very strong mandibles and they really defend their nests. Some species collect a lot of resin from plants, and they put this resin all around, and you can see, for example, all these ants dead here. They just get stuck on the resins, and even the nest inside, all the crevices they fill with resin and clay and everything, so no one can get inside. And they bite. They're strong. They don't sting, but they're strong mandible. They bite. One interesting thing is that we call them stingless bees, but actually they're not stingless bees. They have stings, but just because it's atrophiate, they cannot sting actually. So or the correct, we should call them bees that don't sting, not stingless bees, but well, the terminology gets used, and that's why. And we have a very special group of bees, the Oxytrigona, which they produce caustic substance in their mandibular glands, and then they will bite you, and they produce these blisters, horrible things. So it's better not disturbing these bees. And about the keeping of the stingless bees, this is a long story. The traditional people living in the Americans used to keep these bees. For example, one good example are the Maya. They have even the story of keeping bees in their Maya codice. And also throughout the Americas and even in other parts of the world, people used to have their bees. They take the log of wood from the field where the nest is inside, bring close to their house, and then they just collect the pollen pods and they crush by hand, removing the wax and the honey at the same time. But in the last decades, the keeping of stingless bees became very interesting. A lot of people got interested, and then some technology was developed, like, for example, the hives developed especially for these bees. And then we have what we call now meliponiculture, that's keeping melipona or meliponini bees more specifically. And then you can see that the boxes, they have the bottom part that is the nest, and then the suppers are on the top here, as you can see, where they produce the honey pots, and you can just take it back to a place where you can have some hygiene to harvest this honey. And the honey vary a lot in colors, from white, yellow, even green, and it's natural colors depending on the plants and the bee species. And here you can see that you can just pierce this the honeycombs, the honey pots, and with something to suck this nectar out, like, for example, the one that you use in dentists, for example, that equipment, then you can pull it out. And the production vary a lot of these species, because the smaller ones will produce no more than 200 millimeters per year, but larger species can produce 6 to 8 kilos of honey per year. But most species, something between 1 to 3 kilos per year. It's very little, but the price is high. And in recent years, they have become some sort of specialty product. So these cuisine chefs, they are using a lot of honey in preparing their food. So it's getting a lot of value. Also, the selling of the colonies is very important, because as they are native bees, we cannot just go in the woods and remove the laws. The law does not allow it for that. So there is a demand for colonies. So the people who keep these bees, they can split the colonies and they sell it. And also, we are using these bees also to pollinate on the greenhouse, because our honeybee here is Africanized, it's aggressive. So the stingless bees, they have been very useful. For example, like here on the seedless watermelon production, you can use these bees, and we are using it for strawberries. We can use it for other crops. One problem is because these bees, the colony grows slow, and usually people can split it once and produce 1 or 2 colonies per year. So there's a lot of pressure for producing more colonies to avoid people taking them from the forest, but they reproduce slowly. So some research has been done. For example, in the case of that bees that produce queens when you give more food. So there are some interesting papers showing that you can produce these queens in labs, and then you had a lot of queens that you can split your colonies. But usually you have the queens, but you don't have enough bees for that. And here's a paper we just published with some students in the Journal of Cultural Research in August, where we are taking advantage in the case of melipona, where they already produce the excessive number of queens. We are taking these queens and we are presenting them to a reduced number of workers And then as the workers accept these beans, so you can slowly build new colonies, but in this case, you can produce many colonies per year. It's labor intensive, but it works very well. If someone is interested, it's there in the paper, it's just a matter of reading there. It was tested in these species, Melipona subnitida, but the queen production is the same for other Melipona species, so we are now testing another Melipona species, but it works as well. And just closing to the end, just saying that this is some of our colonies, as you can see here, where we have these bees, and it's a good perspective for the stingless bees. So, as a final remarks, I would like to say that there's a great diversity of bee species in the world. We know that each species has its own role in the ecosystem, and you should learn about and do our best to conserve these bees. To conserve, not to preserve. We don't need to leave them there and not touch them. We can conserve them. We can exploit these bees in a sustainable way. So solitary bees and stingless bees of Brazil and other countries in America, just an example of how fascinating the bees are and how we can use them in a sustainable way to benefit both the bees and humans. So I would like to thank everyone. These are some of the students and people who have worked with me, undergrad and graduate students, and also thank the institutions that have been supported us, public and private institutions. So that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry if it's too long.
It's fine.
Difficult to talk about so many bees with so many interesting things to talk about them.
Thank you so much, Breno. That was absolutely fascinating. I mean, it just, well, mind-blowing compared to our bee fauna. That was quite amazing. Yes. So if anyone has questions, please use the chat function or put your hand up or in some way. Tony Lack asks, well, Tony, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned oils. They forage for oils. Can you describe what that is? Because we think of water and pollen and nectar and propolis. So what do you mean by oils?
Well, it's real oil. Real oil. Some plants, as I said, they secrete oil, vegetable oil, and the bee collect this oil, which is very energetic, sorry, and they use it as a source of energy for their bees and also to build the nest. So there are a variety of these oils. Depends on each plant species that will release the oil, but it's oil, real oil, vegetable oil.
Okay, thank you.
So as you say, Tony, it's, I mean, once you press the rapeseed oil, you get the oil. So,
but you have to press it first, and that was the
yes.
bit I was coming to. Yeah.
Oh yes, but then it's different. For example, if you think about, for example, canola, if you press canola, you get oil out of canola, right? But it doesn't work for these bees because they collect the oil from the flowers. So they need to be plants which produce the oil in these special glands on the flowers.
Okay, so they get oil instead of
really
nectar?
I've tried, for example, just to have an idea. As I showed to you, these bees can pollinate other plants than the oil flowers. For example, I've tried to use these bees to pollinate cashew, and it didn't work because they don't reproduce in the area because there are no oil plants in the area, only cashew plants, right? So I've tried to investigate this oil to have maybe prepare an artificial oil that I would take to them to the area, but it didn't work. It only worked, at least up to now, with the oil secreted from these plants. And there are some of these oil that are even unknown. We don't find when you look in with the chemistry guys we worked, they are not simply they were not described yet or classified yet. It's difficult.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, did you want to ask your question, or Tony Madgwick, would you care to unmute and
Sorry, I wasn't expecting you to address. Yeah, no, I was just commenting the fact that anyways, interesting. We do have Macropis europaea in the UK, which will gather oils from yellow loosestrife. They're quite localized, and when you see them, they're super little bees, and they do remind me very much of some of these bees that Breno's been talking about, and they are absolutely fantastic to watch. Not much seems to be written about them, as far as I'm aware. And we have them nearby with us, and they nest in wet banks, and so line the nest to waterproof them. But they are very local and very much restricted to where we get stands of yellow loosestrife. But well worth looking out for. Beautiful little bees if you get a chance to look at them.
where are you, Tony?
We're in London, so East London.
Okay.
So we have colonies scattered throughout Wanstead Park and Wanstead Flat, well, mostly Wanstead Park. Okay. Which is brilliant to have. I think there's some other else. Mark Patterson's on the chat somewhere as well, and he's I think he's got some experience with Macropis as well.
Gosh, right. Okay. Any more questions?
I've put one in there.
Go on then.
Tony again. Sorry to hog.
No.
The emerging queens, you've got a whole bunch of them. They've got no stingers, or they've got no sting. Do they fight for supremacy? And if so, how?
Not too bad.
Usually, these new queens, when they emerge, the workers go and kill them. So they don't actually fight against the workers, but they have a series of movements they do and a behavior where they try to stop the workers. They try to show their feet and they are capable of heading a colony. But usually, if the colony has already a laying queen, they will just kill them. And the queens will, if you put them together, they will be aggressive against each other. Yes, they will do. But the workers, no, they just trying to make this kind of performance, trying to avoid death. And some try to escape from the colonies. They can even try to invade other colonies, for example, which are there are already work showing that they may go to other colonies if the other colony is queenless, and they may be accepted, but just a small amount. The paper I mentioned, we describe how this queen performance happened and how they that's why in the beginning we placed just a few workers with them, because if you have less workers, it's more likely that the queen can be successful in convincing this work. Doing that, we reach more than 80% of acceptance.
Roger, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yes, I was going to ask if the stingless bees the queens have equivalent pheromones to mellifera bees. That is,
Roger, could you speak louder, because it's too low for me.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah. It's better.
Right. The stingless bees, the queens, do they have the same or equivalent pheromones as mellifera bees, such as queen substance and footprint pheromone?
Yes. They're not this thing of the queen pheromone on stingless bees is not well studied like in the honeybee. But yes, the bees recognize the queen by its pheromone, not by the queen itself. If you place a dead queen there, they will just remove it. For example, they will not recognize it as a queen, but provided it's alive and releasing their queen pheromone, yes, they will recognize as a queen.
Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Bob. It was a great talk, Breno. Lots of variety, completely overwhelming, the variety and the artistry of these bees. Could I ask you, have you ever come across any honey produced by these bees that is hallucinogenic?
No, I have not yet, but I would not be surprised, especially in the Amazon forest.
An interesting question from Jeremy Timer. How do the meat collecting bees differ from wasps?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
How do the meat collecting bees differ from wasps?
Oh, right. Well, because they are bees. If you catch one of the bees, then you have all the characteristics the bees have. Like, for example, while the wasp has single hairs, they have branched hairs, and they still have some corbiculae that is atrophied. It's smaller, but they still have the corbiculae. So it's interesting because these three species I showed, they are obligatory necrophages, but there are some other species which are facultative. That means that when they usually use pollen, but when they don't find pollen, they can go to this resource. Yeah. So it's interesting.
I think, is there an evolutionary point here, Breno? Because bees generally tend to have evolved from provisioning wasps, is the meat eating a new factor in evolution, or is it an old factor?
It seems that it's an adaptation that these bees had to go through. We need to consider that, for example, the Amazon area, until recent times, geological times, it was very different. For example, before the ants grow, there was basically sea and the river, the Amazon River, they flew in the other way around. Instead of flowing from, for example, from Ecuador, Colombia to Brazil, it was the other way around. And then we didn't have this huge forest that we have now. And one mistake that people have, they think the Amazon forest, because of the diversity of the plants and animals, they think that we go there are flowers everywhere and a lot of food, and it's not like that. One may have more than 100 different species per hectare of land, and when they are not blooming, there's nothing to eat in there. So probably this was a kind of adaptation. They had to go backwards, let's say. We don't say that in evolution, but let's say that they had to go back for the meats like their ancestors, their wasp ancestors, to survive when they don't find pollen.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I've had a lot of very complimentary comments up here, so thank you very, very much indeed, Breno. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
So unless there's any further, go on then, Roger. You're the last question. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a bit of a sound problem at the time, but did I understand you to say that the stingless bees had a cuckoo bee?
I didn't hear you. It's too.
Yeah, sorry. Do you hear me, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Can you put the question to Breno,
Bob,
please?
could you make this question, please?
Roger was asking whether, I can't remember which variety it was, but he was asking about cuckoo bees. Taking over the nest of established colonies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. At the time, I had a sound problem. I couldn't hear very well, and I couldn't understand the sort of process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's.
I think Breno knows them as parasitic bees.
Okay. Yes, parasitic then. Yes.
Yeah. You gave some examples.
We saw that. But it's not common on stingless bees that other colonies overtake a nest. May happen, but it's not common.
Right. Okay, I'm going to call an end to it there. Thank you very much again, Breno. That was absolutely fabulous. Just amazing to see the variety of wildlife that you have. So, yeah, many thanks. And I'll close the meeting with a few slides of my own, which show some of the things which are coming up in the next few months. As I mentioned, this was our 20th talk via Zoom. We've got a few more coming up through the winter. The next one is our traditional Christmas one, which is a beekeeper's question time. And then following that, there will be something in January, and in February we have Alison McAfee from North Carolina State University talking about the perilous life of a drone. And then I think we'll be into the beekeeping season here in the UK, and we'll have a bit of a gap. So thank you very much again, everyone. Please have a look at our website, cabk.org.uk, and you can sign up for free to any of the talks that we've got coming up in the future. So many thanks again. Good night to everyone. And the final thank you, Breno. Brilliant talk.
Thank you very much, and my apologies for the problem we had with the internet at the beginning.
That was great. It was fine once
Great.
we moved rooms.
Thank you, Breno. It was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you.
interesting.
It was a pleasure.
Really interesting.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.